Good morning to each of you, and I now call you to order the meeting of the Board of Regents for this work session this morning. One of the board's highest priorities is to raise the national profile of the university's academic health sciences and guide the evolution of the mHealth partnership. mHealth negotiations have been ongoing since October, when the board approved a letter of intent between the University, Fairview, and the University of Minnesota physicians. Today, the administration will outline for our review the framework for the new mHealth partnership. Mr. President, would you be so kind as to begin this morning with opening remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. History does not happen on a straight line, but we are getting close to achieving our vision and reaching our goals for an integrated world-class health system and a national leading medical school. That will be truly historic for the university and for healthcare in the state of Minnesota. Our vision for this new health system and partnership has been in the works for about 3 years now, but this current process, as you mentioned, began about 7 months ago. In October of 2015, you approved a non-binding letter of intent to explore combining Fairview Health Services, one of the oldest and most respected health systems in the state, and University of Minnesota Physicians, UMP, the Regents' premier physicians group, into a fully integrated academic health system called University of Minnesota Health, and we're getting very close to the finish line. Our vision is as follows: a full integration with Fairview Health Services to provide exceptional patient care, fortify a strong and lasting pipeline of healthcare professionals for the state, contribute to the state's economic vitality through medical discoveries and innovation, and serve Minnesota's health needs from community-based public health through highly specialized care and treatment. And the goals of this integration are clear. If I can have the next slide. Thank you. They are to strengthen our shared mission to heal, discover, and educate for longer, healthier lives, help elevate the medical school and the academic health center nationally, which has been a goal of mine since I became president 5 years ago, to bring new treatments and cures to patients more quickly, deliver market-leading care and be the provider of choice, and to prepare the next generation of health professionals. And that will all add up to a historic achievement. I want to offer special thanks to Fairview's board chair and interim CEO Dave Murphy for his commitment to this process, and a big thank you to the presenters, Vice President Fitzrider, Dean Brooks-Jackson, and UMP CEO Bobby Daniels. They've done great work to get us here, and we are in the final stages. So with that, I will turn over to the team.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. President. Dr. Jackson?
Yes, Regent Johnson, members of the committee. President Kaler gave you the why to this process. We're going to talk you through some of the how. There are several key pieces to this agreement, issues that need to be resolved correctly in order to reach our goal of a world-class academic health system and a world-class medical school. It's important to think about both of those pieces. In order to generate the revenue and access that we need for the medical school, it is critical that we build a great, efficient system with high-quality, accessible care for patients around the state. The key areas that we plan to cover today are governance, including reserve powers for the Board of Regents, physician leadership and the structure of the clinical organization, physician group structure, funds flow, education and research, and branding, the CEO search and our due diligence reports, and plans to address findings. I'll start with governance. As this board knows, we agreed in the negotiation of the letter of intent that the board would be 50-50, half the members appointed by the Board of Regents and half by the community, initially appointed by the current Fairview board. This board appointed initial designees in February to search for and recommend a CEO. That work is underway, and I'll say more about our progress later in the presentation. We know that the powers reserved for this board in order to protect the university and the medical school are of utmost importance. You can see on slide 5 that they are moving the UMH office out of state. We wanted to stay in the state of Minnesota. Matters including decreasing the number of proportion of UMH board members, elimination of matters requiring approval by a UMH board supermajority or by the Vice President for Health Sciences, change in control of University of Minnesota Health as a legal entity, sale of all or substantially all of UMMC or the new clinics and surgery center, and any change in major academic affiliation that has an impact on the university. We have 2 other levels of approval in the new governance structure that we believe will provide for extra protection for the university and the medical school. I'm not going to read them all, but will highlight a few. First, there are issues that require the mutual approval of the Vice President for Health Sciences and the CEO. The list here includes the hiring of the lead physician, new service lines and leaders, terminating multiple faculty in the same specialty, a department chair or division leader, and any change in the baseline mission support beyond the first year. There are also issues that require a supermajority of the board. In this case, that means 11 of 14, which means there will always be a majority required of both of the 7 appointees of the community and of the university. So appointment of a CEO and his or her compensation, any restructuring of legacy UMP, a declaration of financial exigency, or any resulting change in fixed mission support. You can see from these provisions in particular how important your board selections are in ensuring that our representatives are closely connected to the Regents and understand our academic priorities. And with that, I'll turn the next over to Bobby Daniels.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. Dr. Daniels, please.
Regent Johnson and the remainder of the Board of Regents. Another element of the key deal points is the integration of physician leadership throughout the new integrated academic health system. The lead physician will be a faculty member appointed by the CEO with approval of the VP of Health Sciences. The lead physician will also share the role of the Vice Dean for Clinical Affairs. Academic chairs or their respected designees will serve as the clinical leads for the specialty and subspecialty units at University of Minnesota Medical Center. And over time, specialty and subspecialty physicians will be managed as one group across the system. In that capacity, the chairs will report to the lead physician for those clinical responsibilities. Physicians will be included in all levels of decision-making within the new academic health system, and the UMP and Fairview Medical Group structures will remain in place initially. Another part of the deal relates to the formation of an integrated physician group across the new health system. The CEO and lead physician, in consultation with the VP of Health Sciences, will initiate a best-of assessment regarding the physician organization structure. Initially, UMP will retain separate benefits for employed physicians and staff, and over time, an alternative structure may be developed. Total compensation will be at market competitive levels. I'll now turn the floor over to Mr. Fitzenreiter.
Thank you. Mr. Fitzenreiter, please.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'm going to just highlight some things about funds flow in the key deal points of this agreement we're headed to make. There are a couple of important pieces to that. One is the fixed academic support. That's been fixed at $75 million, and you should think about that as in perpetuity above the line, not subject to net operating income. This is a fixed number. That amount does reflect the current support that the medical school receives from UMP and Fairview. That amount will be fixed for the first 5 years of the agreement. Starting in year 6, it will inflate by the CPI annually. There is a structured review at 10-year intervals. That number could, of course, in a structured review, go up or go down, but there is provisions to do sort of a recheck-in on that number. As mentioned earlier, the only way that $75 million outside of the 10-year restructure discussion could go down is if by a supermajority the board declares a fiscal exigency, and even then that number could only go down proportional to the size of the overall financial issue that the entity faces. There is a provision for variable academic support based on total mHealth operating performance. In this case, for example, the entity will budget a net operating income, and it's important to note that that budget, and why it's also to emphasize important to have competency-based board members, is you don't want the entity to create a phony budgeted NOI or an unrealistic NOI, because in the deal, the university will receive 25 cents on every dollar of budgeted NOI, of every dollar above the budgeted NOI. For example, if the entity budgeted an $80 million NOI and the actual came in $50 million higher, the university and the medical school, under that provision, would receive a $12.5 million payment from the system. That's just to illustrate how it works. Those dollars, the variable academic support, will be directed by the dean of the medical school. If you turn to the next slide, there is other provisions. There's a clinical innovation fund of $1 million annually for 5 years, again to invest in clinical innovation and clinical research, designed to partner faculty and non-faculty physicians. There is also going to be a capital planning provision in the agreement, and that language will be consistent with the LOI. There will be post-integration. The entity will create a 5-year financial plan, and that capital plan, as part of that 5-year financial plan, will include priority to private inpatient rooms and modernization of the operating rooms here on the hospital on campus. There's also provision requesting the foundation, of course, to pursue philanthropic opportunities for the new mHealth entity. And with that, I'll turn back to Dr. Jackson to lead us through some education and research provisions.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzenreiter. Dr. Jackson?
Yes, Chair Johnson, Regents. Education and research are equally important parts of the medical schools and AHC's mission, so it's critical that our agreement ensures the expansion of clinical training sites that we need for medicine, but also the other health professional students in the AHC. This is important both for training, learning in interprofessional settings, and teams is key for our students and for the system. The system will have the first chance to get to know what we consider to be the best future healthcare professionals around. Graduate medical education commitments, residents, will be determined by the system. This is an important step forward. Currently, Fairview determines how many slots the system will offer and fund. In the new system, we will have more influence over this program. The university's GME program will remain in the medical school. The letter of intent also clearly stated that clinical research will expand throughout the mHealth system, and we intend for this to be reflected in the definitive agreement, although I don't think we've agreed on the specific language yet. The expansion is critically important to the AHC. Currently, almost all of our clinical trial work focuses on campus. Access to sites and patients across the system and the state will give us a better chance to work with industry and to successfully compete for NIH grants. It will also provide better access for patients to new drugs and devices across the state that didn't have access previously unless they came to our campus. And with that, I'll turn the branding issue over to Dr. Daniels.
Thank you, Dr. Daniels.
Chair Johnson and Regents, the new entity will do business as University of Minnesota Health. The university will retain ownership of the name, and the initial entities to be branded mHealth include the hospitals, clinics, and pharmacies. The entities that may later have an endorsement from mHealth include organizations like Ebenezer, but only after further review and approval by the university. Criteria will be put in place to determine which components of Fairview use the name and which can use it in the future. There will be an ongoing working relationship between university relations and the marketing function of the new health system. And with that, I'll turn the floor back to Dean Jackson.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson.
Okay. Chair Johnson, Regents. In terms of the CEO search, we are feeling very positive about this search. The search committee, made up half of university and half community members, has identified two extremely excellent candidates. Both are academic physicians and both come from very strong academic health systems. In my view, the CEO hire is one of the most important parts of building this academic health system, and the timing of this hire is critical to the success of this system. We aim to offer a candidate this position shortly after the final Board of Regents vote, and we have ensured that he or she will be in place as a condition of closing. And with that, I'll turn the due diligence talk to Council Keith Dunder.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. Council Dunder, thank you.
Chair Johnson, Regents. As you know, we've conducted a due diligence process under attorney-client privilege, which is common to maintain an appropriate level of confidentiality about the information that goes back and forth between the parties. And we've focused on the financial, you can read the slide obviously, but on the financial strength and efficiency, the organizational strengths, the integration complexity, services and capabilities, and legal compliance. And we have not found there to be any individual items taken in isolation to be something that would cause you to say we shouldn't do this. But in aggregate, we believe there are issues that require some correction. And so what the result of that would be that we would create with a third party, I believe Deloitte, a mitigation plan that would address these issues and that will be built into the agreements. And we have yet to get that worked out with Fairview, but it would require that we agree on certain things that are going to be changed and agree that they'll be funded to accomplish the change and so on. And depending on how that plan works out, we may want some things to happen sooner, but in essence, under the contracts, then the plans would be worked out in the future. These things can't be done overnight, and so the new board would have substantial responsibility to see that these commitments are accomplished.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Nunder. Dr. Jackson?
So in terms of next steps, as we've mentioned, there is still work to do on some of the important details and legal documents reflecting those agreements that need to be completed. As soon as possible, those agreements will be made available to this board, to the UMP board, and to the UMP voting faculty. We plan to spend a great deal of time meeting with faculty, explaining the agreement, and answering any and all questions. We will do this in many ways, including forums, department meetings, emails, and a frequently updated website. The voting sequence will be the UMP board will vote first, UMP faculty, then the Fairview board, and final approval with this Board of Regents. Once approved, we would offer the CEO position to our preferred candidate. When he or she is available to start, we will close, and University of Minnesota Health will begin. I want to be clear, we still have work to do, but we have made a lot of progress, and I believe we are close to the finish line. I want to finish where the president started. Being part of a world-class health system is critical to achieving our goals for the medical school. It will generate more resources, create access to more training sites and more clinical trial opportunities, provide better patient care. It will help us to expand our practices and offer academic medicine to more Minnesotans. We will be back with the definitive agreements, but I want to take this first opportunity to thank a number of people. Our legal staff here at the university has been working extremely hard on all of these aspects, and I want to thank them especially for the hard work they're doing and still to be done with the definitive agreements. It is a tremendous amount of work to put these agreements together. I also want to thank the board, particularly the board work group, for your counsel and guidance and support on this. Regent Simmons, thank you for all your time and expertise that you have and will continue to add to this process. And thanks to President Kaler for making this integration in the health sciences one of your highest priorities. With that, we'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you all for your presentation. Board, now is your opportunity to make comments, ask questions of clarification, and so let us begin. We have about a good hour in which to do this, so. Very good. Thank you. We're Regent Hsu, please.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. Presenters, I've just got a couple comments related, or questions related to the timeline. I noticed there are no dates in this presentation, and I'm just a little curious as to how you believe this is going to come out in terms of timing. Like, when will the documents be ready? When will the votes be taken? When will offers be extended? And when will someone be able to start working?
Dr. Jackson?
Chair Johnson, Regent Hsu. So I hesitate to give firm dates, but tentatively, if we continue to make progress at this rate, we would hope within the next 10 days to finalize the points, and our legal counsel on both sides have been working diligently on a number of these agreements. If we can get these final points put in there, ideally it would be in the next 10 days to do that and come back at the June meeting ultimately with the Board of Regents for a vote. But this is a complicated affair. It is complicated. we are working extremely hard, and my intention is to try to get this done in the next 10 days, so,
Regent Shu?
in terms of the... What's that? Yeah, with the idea that we would close August 1st, because to give the, offer the position to the CEO, they will likely, what we understand, probably need 6 weeks to come. So if this were offered around June 15th, we would be looking at August 1st, which would be the actual close date.
Okay, thank you. Regent Shu?
Going back to the, thank you for that answer, by the way. Going back to the issues involving supermajority, I can't remember what slide that was on. If you have it. I'll just say one of the issues that I think we're trying to solve is support for our medical school. And I think you noted here that the $75 million is an amount that reflects basically the same support we're getting today. And I guess my concern is that how long do you think, based on the mitigation of all of the issues discovered in due diligence, do you think that we will actually be in a position to receive the variable portion of that, or the variable academic support payment, which is the 25% above some NOI budget number?
Dr. Jackson or Mr. Fitzenreiter?
So, Chair Johnson, Regent Chu. So a couple things. In terms of the academic fixed-base support, so this was based on the 2015 fiscal year, which was a very good year, one of the best years for UMP. So I think we need to keep that in perspective because, you know, it's, as I said, one of the best years. So I think in this healthcare environment, you know, there's a lot of changes going on, and I think one cannot discount the value of a guarantee in this environment going forward with that. At the same time, you know, there is the additional $1 million a year for the Clinical Innovation Fund, which has been something that the medical school typically has been funding, so that is additional. On the variable support, I'll just give you an example. This year, at the Fairview, the budgeted NOI is $75 million for the year. In the first quarter, the NOI is $35 million. So if this holds up for the rest of the year, you know, that would end up being close to a $65 million over the NOI, which would be 25% of that. So that would be, you know, roughly $16 million would come to the medical school. So it's certainly not guaranteed, but why we think this is different than in the past, one of the key parts of this is that the NOI and any amount above that is it's aligned in terms of the incentives of the senior management team, as well as with the academic mission, and it's not just the financial aspect of this, but in terms of meeting academic goals, whether it's patients on trials or whether it's training slots. So this would be a first, because we've always had the affiliation agreement, which carves out certain parts of it, and it's caused some, the incentives have not been aligned. And so there's been shifting, and we've almost never been able to achieve that variable portion in the past. So we have deliberately design this so that there is alignment on these financial incentives by the executives, the medical school, the academic mission support. So, and in the past, Fairview has typically exceeded NOI.
One more.
Regent Shu.
Thanks. But I'm concerned about the cost of mitigation. We don't know what the cost of all these, you know, things, systems, or whatever we're going to have to put in place. I mean, this could be could it be maybe a 5-year deal where these extra funds are going to go to pay for that instead of flowing out of the mHealth into our medical school?
Chair Johnson, Regent Shu. We don't know the exact cost of that, but that will be borne by the system. That will not be borne by the medical school. Now, obviously, that could affect the budgeted NOI because of those costs of that mitigation, but it will not be out of the fixed academic mission support or any other part of the medical school for that part. It is true. The key for us is that there is an infrastructure in place for compliance that really will be best practices, whether it's in coding and billing, whether it's in terms of Stark law issues with physician compensation. These are the key things. We have to be sure that they're in place, that we are really running a top organization in that respect.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Fitzenreiter?
Mr. Chairman, and maybe Mr. Dunder wants to add to it too. If you think about the compliance and regulatory area, that's really putting in more people, beefing up some systems and people. We also know there's a pretty big challenge in the IT technology area. Some of that is going to take a little while to, you don't turn on a dime on some of that. Those would be the two big areas of expense.
And we would, of course, try to
Mr. Dunder?
insulate the 75, I'm sorry, Chair Johnson, Regents, we'd try and insulate the 75 million from being affected by any of these changes, but they are expenses, and they will show up someplace in the way the system calculates its return.
Okay, thank you. Regent Beeson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and presenters. I want to follow up on some of the questions that Regent Shoes has started with. And in the business world, when there's a merger and acquisition going on, the proposing group has done a lot of financial due diligence, and there's a lot of pro formas, and they have scoped out where those savings are going to be realized, where the risks are. We've done some of that. And I do understand that in order to do a full business plan, we're going to need a new CEO, and the new board's going to need to engage. I don't have a lot of expectations that we're going to see a variable dividend in the early years, because there's going to be a lot of surprises. There's deferred expenses and compliance, we know from the work that we've done. So I think we need to manage our expectations that there'll actually be money in the early. I hope there is. But my point to the new board and to Regent Simmons would be that this is an opportunity to really start with a zero-based budgeting and really crack open the whole operation top to bottom, because there are efficiency opportunities, there are obviously growth opportunities, but that needs to be really a high priority for the new CEO of this, is using some outside help to achieve those, to get to those financial details. My second point is the most important element, I think, of going into the final negotiations is that we have to achieve an integrated structure. If all we do is put a new logo and a new name on this without creating the culture, not just the structure, but the culture of an fully integrated system, will have failed. So I know it's just a priority to keep focused on, from the position level on down through the organization, is do everything in the agreements that will support a true integration and help make an integrated culture occur.
We agree. Thank you.
Dr. Jackson, you want to respond to that, or just nod your head?
Chair Johnson, Regent Beeson, I fully agree. I think those are some of the major issues, and for the CEO, this will be a very high priority, but knowing who these candidates are, I am fully confident that they are very capable of doing exactly what you're proposing.
Thank you. Regent Anderson.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. I'm speak in favor of everything we're doing here, but I have a question. You know, to me, I look at this as we've got two revenue streams. We've got the Fairview Health System and we've got the UMP physicians coming to form one revenue stream. That new revenue stream will be backed by the Regents of the University of Minnesota, by the state of Minnesota, by the taxpayers eventually, if we're, I mean, that's my question. So my question is, I see in the paper today, there's an article on Blue Cross drew a penalty for past deeds, you know, when they got audited. And I know in the medical field, Medicare, things like that will come back in and audit as maybe years behind what happened. What guarantees do we have from either Fairview Health System or UMP as we become one that we don't get a bill from something that happened 5 years ago on something that they didn't do properly? Do we have guarantees like that?
Chair Johnson, Regent Anderson, what we will try and do, and we don't have this in a document or agreement, but to try and insulate the revenue stream that supports the academic support from liabilities that predated the transaction. As I said, they haven't agreed to that, but that would be our goal. And you're right, it is not just likely, but it's inevitable that overpayments, fines, penalties occur in this industry. And there was just one, but 4 months ago, there was an overpayment for about $4 million or $3 million. And that was based on year 2012, I believe, that Fairview had to pay back to CMS. So that's how far behind the government is in proceeding in these analysis and audits that they do. So these will happen, and we have to try and insulate from that. But they are, as in response to Regent Shu's questions about mitigation, they're expenses. They show up, it's money that comes out, and we can't make it not come out. We can try and protect ourselves from it, but it does affect the bottom line every year.
Very good. Regent
Real briefly,
Anderson?
am I correct in assuming that if that happened today, either Fairview System figures it out from their side or UMP figures it out from their side, but we're going to have a combined deal that the responsibility eventually stops with us?
Chair Johnson, Regent Anderson, no, I don't think so. I don't think any of that would flow through back to the university.
Okay.
It would rest inside the financial house of the new entity.
The new entity.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We're going to thank you. Regent Devine?
Thank you, Regent Johnson. First, let me just make a couple opening kind of comments. On page 16, we're talking about the fixed support components. The issue has been, you know, we've talked about it, and Brooks, you've touched on a number of points that relate to that, and I'm very pleased. It was one of the things that from the very onset of the discussion of moving forward with this that I've had in mind, that we really figure out how to address the academic support, a fixed component of that above the line money. And there are a few variables in there that are a few contingent, I guess you might say, variables that are built into that. In case things happen or things don't work out the way they should, and that's been very thoughtfully considered. I do like the 10-year component, the fact that we can reevaluate at some point up the road, which I think is also important, because if things go well, that I think will probably benefit us on the plus side rather than the negative side going forward. The other levels of the variable aspect of it, if we reach the certain benchmark and the 25% earnout and so on, I think is also a far improvement to where we are right now in terms of being able to do some projections and trying to work through things. So to that end, I'm very pleased with the progress that we've made on that, and obviously all the way to the end. I want to make sure we continue to keep that top of mind, because I think that is a very, very high priority for the board, because that money is very key to what we do here. As it relates to that, there are two other quick things that I just wanted to get clarification on. We've been talking about the structural thing of the money and the components of it. Not much time has been spent, and not that it's a top of mind priority, but certainly the investment in the hospital here on campus and some of the facilities things. The hospital we know is aged. We know that there's definite drawbacks to what we've got right now. There hasn't been much discussion about it. I've heard people within the board say, well, we're not going to do anything with the building for maybe 10 or 15 years. And what I really would like to get a sense is what is the overall feeling about the future investment on the physical plant side to be able to deliver the research facility components of what we need to have right here close to home. Has there been any discussion about that, and what do those numbers look like, and what do you think, very rough approximation, is the timing of doing something like that? Because a lot of other decisions on campus hinge kind of on how that looks, and if it's 15 or 20 years out that we build a hospital or move to that, that's a whole different scenario than if we were trying to do something in the next 5 years or so.
Dr. Jackson.
Chair Johnson, Regent Devine. So in the LOI, as you can see, there is a 5-year plan to have more inpatient, convert the semi-private rooms to private rooms, and modernization of the operating rooms. And there is capital, even within the current mHealth system, the current agreement we have set aside money for doing that. So that is in the plan moving forward. In terms of, ultimately a new hospital, we have nothing in the agreement that specifies there will be a new hospital at this point. I do think that we will ultimately need a new hospital, not just because of the technology changes and requirements, but the population of people over 65 will double in the next 15 years. And even though we're doing more and more outpatient type of procedures, there will still be a need for more inpatient rooms eventually. So, this is something we are clearly aware of. One of the, I guess, advantages of having this one together as this system, in the past, it's been very difficult to plan to expand on this campus with Fairview being a different entity because we have been reluctant to use university land for such purposes, for example. So I think when it's our health system, I think this sort of changes our whole perspective on that in being able to build a larger academic health center in terms of facilities on the eastern part of the campus that we've been planning for.
Mr. Fitzgerald?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, just to echo that investment in the private inpatient rooms and modernizing the operating rooms on the hospital on campus here is a substantial dollar amount. I mean, it's a significant investment that would occur in that facility. Probably could be in excess of $100 million to do that. Once that's done, I don't think it's going to be torn down and replaced, because that's a pretty significant capital investment in that facility.
Regent Devine?
Yeah, thank you. So in light of looking at that, one of the things that I think we hear from the other end of University Avenue is when Mayo came in with their destination medical plan, they came in with a fairly significant vision of what they hope to do and what they hope to accomplish and how it's going to impact the people of Minnesota. And when they got into the discussion about people of Minnesota investing in that, I guess the question that kind of that begs to be answered in my mind is what is our broader picture plan looking like, up the road? Because if we're going to do the improvement component at the $100 million level, is that a signaling to us that really we wouldn't need to do a hospital then for 10 or 15 years out? Or is it really just a stopgap to bring us up to where we maybe need to be because we haven't in the past made the investments that we maybe could have or should have for the reasons that you just mentioned on this? So could you give a little more clarity maybe in the timing of what we're looking at, or is it a long-term, short-term? What does it really look like?
Chair Johnson, Regent Devine. It's hard to be specific about this given the tremendous changes we are seeing in healthcare and reimbursement and these issues right now. I think we actually, to do some of these changes here, it came in at a little over $80 million, as I recall. In our field, capital, the capital expenditures are quite large. That is not uncommon and maybe will only last for 5, 8 years or something like that. But as I said, I do think ultimately we will want a new inpatient facility. That could be 10 years or so. As I said, I don't think it's uncommon to make these type of expenditures on an ongoing basis in current facilities, just because these new technologies and everything require that. Remember, this will be, $180 million sounds like a lot. When this system is put together, we are talking over a $6 billion system overall. So I think this is not unreasonable as ongoing expenditures, really.
And then,
Regent Devine.
yeah, just one more, and that you've given us some boundaries or some clarity on that, which I think is important, because I think we're also trying to gauge what's the appetite, relative to the Fairview side of reinvestment here within the campus research setting versus maybe other locations or whatever. But certainly from the board's perspective, that this future investment is an important one to maintain where we are right now with this $100 million investment. But it gives us a little better feel for up the road if we're for 5 years out or 10 or 20 years out, which some numbers have been thrown out this last week on, then it gives us something to think about relative to that component. And I think the work that we do there going forward is important for our purposes, obviously for planning for all these other issues that center in and around the land issues that we were talking about there. Second question that I was just going to ask, the follow-up question that relates to the technology components and the upgrades that are necessary. We've learned a little bit of data about the technology platforms, which again is another capital-intensive investment. Can you give us a little feel for what we're looking at in terms of the integration and then the technology upgrades that we have to do, they have to do, and what the price tag of that might be and what the timeline of financing that might look like?
Let me give Mr. Chairman, members, I'll just give a little color to that and then turn to Dr. Daniels, who lives with some of this technology problems between the systems. But, in the due diligence, one of the issues is that Fairview currently has one data center that, in a big operation, you'd like to have backup provisions. So that's one expense. In one sense, they're not unlike us, where, we're facing a pretty significant future expenditure for our network upgrade, routers in the closets, technology. That's certainly also the useful life is an issue in the Fairview entity as well, like it is for us. But then in just terms of systems, day-to-day business operating systems, I'd turn to Dr. Daniels for a little color on that.
Thank you, Dr. Daniels.
Chair Johnson, Regent Devine, there are a variety of investments that are being made in terms of technology and will continue to need to be made. Some of those are catching up to the current standard, and some will catapult us to the next level. I think if you think about what was done in the CSC, the new clinics and surgery center, that perhaps is a model of what needs to be done. The ambulatory platform of the electronic medical record was a little bit behind. A lot of the technology that can ease and facilitate patient visits had not been integrated. The investments were made for that to happen, and part of the ongoing support of the clinics and surgery center will be to continue to make those kinds of investments. So that needs to be broadly done across the hospital system and the ambulatory system. And I think our Fairview counterparts are aware of that, and the new CIO of Fairview is beginning to lay out a plan. In addition, you know that as part of the due diligence, several high priority areas have been identified, and so we would want to understand how those needs can be met over the shorter term.
Any cost or timeline as it relates to what we're talking about here?
Well, the estimates from the due diligence for the items that Mr. Fitzenreiter mentioned are about $100 million. Some of those are more acute many of them can be made over a 5-year period of time, and are not out of line for what a $6 billion healthcare enterprise would be thinking about. I think that's the important thing.
Very good. Regent Rocha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Got a couple questions. What percentage of the current Fairview system as it is estimated to be directly involved in the research and medical education part of the university's mission in this context compared to if Fairview was operating independently?
Dr. Jackson?
Chair Johnson, Regent Rocha. So there are various ways of looking at it. If you just look at what is a percent of the revenues of the Fairview system, what we call M-Health, the little M-Health now, is about 55% of overall revenues. But if you look at the number of hospitals and clinics, UMMC is by far the largest. And most, I would say, and Bobby, you can correct me, but probably 95% of the training, for example, and research does occur on this campus. We do have some, a little bit at Fairview Southdale, for example, but we don't have programs, for example, up in Hibbing or at Lakes or Northland. Some of our physicians do practice out there, but we really have very few programs or clinical trials or anything like that. And so there are, I believe, 6 hospitals and a number of clinics. Pharmacies, for example, there's some 42 pharmacies in the Twin Cities area. We do want to expand this, not just training for doctors, but pharmacists, for example, and nursing. So the great percentage of Fairview facilities are not involved with this. Like I said, most of it's here. I don't know if, Bobby, you want to add to that?
Dr. Daniels?
Yeah, I would support Dean Jackson's statement.
Regent Rocha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the main issues I think most of the people around this table know, I'm very concerned about governance questions. And so one of the, in light of that, and certainly that can grow over time. You'll have opportunity, obviously, for access to patients in different facilities. Maybe Hibbing makes sense because you've got a different population there than you might in the metro area. But taking that as it is, how do we ensure that people aren't mistakenly believing that they're entering a University of Minnesota facility or being served by the University of Minnesota when they go to a facility that is receiving, when they're receiving care from an M-Health facility? How do we make sure they understand that distinction?
Dr. Daniels?
Chair Johnson and Regent Rocha, the branding agreement includes fairly strict rules around, in essence, what is a licensing agreement of the university of its name, and so the branding would involve University of Minnesota Health, would require a significant interaction between the new entity and the Office of University Relations. Certain quality standards would need to be met, and the clinical quality of the clinical sites would need to be overseen. We're proposing a group of physicians, including the VP of Health Sciences and faculty, who would be very involved in assuring that quality exists. It would be very much like the current University of Minnesota Health oversight and relationship and use of the brand throughout the mini M-Health, as Dean Jackson referred to.
Regent Rocha?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I guess the question, and I appreciate the answer, the question is actually less about that side of it. And maybe Mr. Dunder can help me with this. Looking at the sort of the base language of the government of the University of Minnesota is vested in a board of 12 regions. We won't be governing this entity. And so to what extent are we making sure that the people, the public, that are using these facilities don't believe that they're being served by the University of Minnesota? Because if they are being served by the University of Minnesota, then this board would be the governing body, not M-Health. So how do we make sure they understand that it's not the University of Minnesota, but an affiliation of the University of Minnesota in some way that we don't violate our constitutional obligations.
Mr. Dunder?
Regent Rocha, Chair Johnson, I think that the M Health brand will be a distinct brand, and it won't be the University of Minnesota. Obviously, the association is there, and the association is real because of the appointment of the board and because of the faculty being involved in the quality standards and medical directorships and so on in the system. But this is a fairly common model now around the country as academic health systems have grown to include and encompass community hospitals and clinics and so on. And I'm not sure, I might not be following your question completely clearly.
Regent Rocha, you want to make clarification, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would need to look at what other models are around the country and what their governing documents and what their charters say, because obviously a private or a separate setting with a different charge from a state, or maybe not even a state school relationship, doesn't have the same obligation we do as a board to ensure that we are meeting our constitutional obligation as the government of the University of Minnesota. And in this setting, when you call it, University of Minnesota Health, and that's, very specifically the trademark, that is trademark, trade dress, it's the block M, it's the maroon. When my 70-year-old plus parents walk into an M Health facility, they're going to believe they're walking into the University of Minnesota. But it won't be governed by the University of Minnesota, which appears to be in pretty clear conflict with the Constitution. So how do we make sure that they don't mistakenly believe that they are being served by the university, but they're being served by an entity that is affiliated perhaps with the university?
Dr.
Chair Johnson, Regent Rocha, I think this new system, half of the board will be appointed by the regent. So in effect, I do believe it is under partly the governance, not control, but governance of the University of Minnesota. Even right now with our affiliation agreement, of which the university does not have 50% of the Fairview board now, we use the University of Minnesota Health brand. So every patient that walks into the UMC, the Fairview Hospital, the university hospital here, believes that they are coming into a University of Minnesota Health facility, and that the University of Minnesota is part of that, when in fact we don't actually control that hospital or the Fairview board. So in fact, I think this new agreement has more opportunity to ensure the quality and assure patients that their care is being better overseen by the university. So I think this is even more reassuring to patients than our current agreement.
Regent Rocha?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't want to belabor it. I don't want to address the current situation because I don't know that anybody around here is suggesting the current situation is a good one. Otherwise, we wouldn't be looking for change. And I wasn't part of that conversation, but I would have those same reservations and the same concerns, and I think a lot of other people do as well. So I think this is a significant challenge in this regard. I think that it opens the university to a criticism. We would not, for instance, say, well, maybe we as a board would have more time to focus on other things if we contracted with an entity, whether nonprofit or for-profit, National American University, to run the Twin Cities campus, and we get, we don't have controlling interest, but we have half interest, which is pretty good. Well, but that's not government. That's not the government. That doesn't control the government. And we wouldn't do that. We wouldn't say that we're going to let this other entity run the Morris campus or the Duluth campus. We would be in violation of our constitutional duty. We can continue that conversation in another setting perhaps, but I noticed on one of the slides that it referred to designees for the board. I think that's a bit of a misstatement because we're still having that conversation. What do we know as a board, what the process for electing the board's designees to this entity's board? Do we know more what that process is going to be? I think that, or will there be an opportunity for us to have that conversation going forward?
Mr. Dunder, please.
Chair Johnson, Regent Rocha, the the final appointments to the board with terms and so on. The terms would be, the plan now is the terms would be 3-year terms, and initial appointments as common would be staggered, 1, 2, 3 years, so that every year there would be 2 appointments coming up for renewal in the future, and that allows continuity and a constant sort of, not a revolving door, but a constant process of evaluation and appointment. But the board would need to make those appointments in a formal way, attached to specific terms, and so on. That would, I presume, that would happen in a meeting in the future, in the summer.
Mr. Chair,
Regent Rocha.
Mr. Dunder, do we have the opportunity as a board? I mean, our process of selecting our designees to this board is a pretty big deal, really, when you think about the magnitude of what's going on, independent of my earlier concerns. And I feel a little bit spoon-fed on that. It would seem that this is something that this board could talk about and say, well, what are we looking for? What are we comfortable with? Or does this entity dictate to us how we get to pick our designees?
Chair Johnson, Regent Rocha, I don't think the entity is dictating anything. I think that the regents are going to make these selections as they make other selections through your own subgroups and committees and so on.
And do we know how that process will proceed?
I'm not privy to the details of as it's going on.
Regent Rocha, I expect, like any appointments, names will be brought forward, be vetted by appropriate committee and voted on by the entire board. Regent Simmons, do you have clarification, please?
Thank you, Chair Johnson and Regent Rocha and colleagues. The task force of Regent McMillan and former Regent Frobenius and I have been engaged in working on a proposal to bring to this Board of Regents that would detail the specifics of what we believe this board needs and some specific names to bring forward. We are working in a coordinated way, so we have the single best board we can get with Fairview leadership and with an outside search consultant who does executive searches in healthcare for healthcare boards. So we'll be coming forward with a proposal. The timing on that is such that we've needed to see what the deal is, what the ultimate entity is before finalizing recommendations and bringing them forward for discussion and vetting. But we can do that whenever you want.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Further questions, comments? Further comments, questions? Regent Simmons, please.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on behalf of the task force you've delegated to work on your behalf. Former Regent Frobenius and Regent McMillan and I have been engaged with administration and, when appropriate, with Fairview leadership to go forward trying to make sure that we represent the regents well in getting the right questions on the table, the right expectations set. We believe this is the most important decision this board's likely to make, and most important piece of this president's legacy, press notwithstanding. Given the importance of this, we've tried hard to represent you well, and today, to me, is a really good example of how thoughtful this board is on looking at this serious issue. And I won't repeat the points made, but every point brought up today I consider has been on the mark in terms of things we ought to be thinking about as a board. I do want to remind us of a couple of things to help us prepare for ultimate action. One is why we're doing this. The objective is not integration. The objective is securing the future of the University of Minnesota's medical school and taking it to a higher level. That's the objective. That's the goal. Integration has been selected as the strategy, the tactic to get us there. And why integration and why with Fairview? Well, if we don't integrate, we don't have the opportunity to get objectives aligned, to improve governance and management of this whole system, and to put in place the kind of leadership essential for the future of this medical school and a successful academic health system, and that is physician leadership, academic physician leadership. And I want to emphasize in front of the negotiators that that means at every level. That isn't just the hiring of the CEO or a couple members on the board. It means at every important level. One of the issues that I want to emphasize today, I won't repeat the good things people have said, just know I consider them important and they'll be on our attention list. I want to raise for me, something that's so important, and that is our faculty. There is no medical school without a faculty. There actually can be without buildings. You kind of need patience, but you cannot do this without faculty. And we need to attend to our faculty here. We need to make sure that the deal, that the governance, that the management are all creating the right environment for our faculty. We don't want them to inherit liability. So there's got to be very crisp language in this deal that prevents individual physicians and the group of physicians and this university from inheriting any additional liability. We have to make sure their time is appropriately rewarded to engage in education and research as well as practice. Don't get me wrong, this thing can't succeed unless we have an extremely high value, high quality, reasonable cost practice, but we can never have them going, oh, the only way I make my income is by generating RVUs, seeing patients. I don't have time to teach that class and certainly not going to write that grant proposal for the NIH. So this deal, the governance, the management have to respect the academic commitment we must have from our faculty. We have to be able to keep good faculty. We have to be able to recruit good faculty. So the environment created by this deal must make sure that that is the case. And we as regents continually must make sure we are holding administration accountable for the policies that govern how we treat faculty and our expectations of faculty. I just don't want to lose sight of that. This deal doesn't end when UMP votes. Our responsibility, if anything, intensifies at looking over the faculty. We haven't talked a lot, because I think it's pretty explicit, about the Regents' reserve powers, but let's make sure that they are good so that whoever serves on the board of mHealth, University of Minnesota Health, we are able to protect the greatest interests of this university. We aren't going to own this thing, but we have this opportunity to provide 50% of the governance for it and to have the appropriate reserve powers over the use of our name and marks. Nothing should bear the university's name that we aren't proud to say that's University of Minnesota. We should never waver from that. I do want to kind of close by saying that for this university's medical school to succeed, this practice has to succeed. And we need to set this up in the way that this practice will succeed. If we think from sitting here we can control that, well, we never have and we never will. So let's make sure we get this right in the contracts, but also right in appointments to the board and in retaining the appropriate reserve power. So thank you. This was a really important discussion. Appreciate the presentation. The work behind it is monumental. But the discussion of this board gives me a lot of confidence in us, because we are putting forward the right concerns, questions, and expectations. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Simmons. I have a very elementary question and observation. When there is a new product, new service coming forth, people hear about this product, and in the medical community, are those individuals that are outside the university today starting to inquire as to what this is about, and would there be any possibilities of not my personally, but them being engaged in this and being a part of it? I mean, that's you know, someone in California, someone in New York, physician, have a renewed interest.
Talk about, the national level, that this is different, or about our industry potential?
Evidently not.
No, it's too many to count.
Chair Johnson and Regents, when we first announced this, Dean Jackson and I actually visited with healthcare leaders throughout the Twin Cities, and there was a considerable amount of enthusiasm and support for what we're doing, and that continues to this day. There's also interest nationally with what we're doing, and the fact that we're able to attract the high-quality CEO candidates, I think is a testament to the fact that this really can be something different and unique, and we can take these pieces which have been coexisting side by side for 20 years and put them together in a way that can have a marked impact on the local and national the market. What we hope we're able to do is attract community partners who want to work with us, and state partners who might want to work with us, and also that we can attract the best and the brightest faculty in all of the health sciences schools to University of Minnesota Health and the University of Minnesota's Academic Health Center.
Dr. Jackson?
Yes, Chair Johnson. I think one of the things I've heard as Dean of the Medical School and interacting with our industry partners is that we are at a disadvantage because we're a relatively small academic health system, being primarily just on this campus, and they often go outside of Minnesota to other academic health systems to enroll patients in clinical trials because they have a much broader network in their academic health system. And so they choose others over us because of that. And I think, part of our mission is we are an economic engine for this state. And I think this new academic health system, by expanding our clinical trial network, does not just benefits patients and having better access to new drugs and new devices, but I think it also will really help promote and support our local industry. We are the medical device capital of the world, really. I mean, 400 medical device companies in this city, and yet some of them are telling us we don't have the large enough academic health network to provide the services they want. So I think that's another big thing, and I'm hearing very positive things from those industries.
Regent Simmons, comment?
The only thing I would add is actually going forward with this, you can shine a nice, bright, positive light when you're hiring a CEO to get some national interest, and which is a very good thing. I would believe that the physicians are very smart who are in our faculty and would see the potential here and make it exciting to stay here or come here. We've got that, but that's our job, is to create that. And we haven't been at the point yet where we ought to advertise this to the world. We need to see the deal.
Very good. I remind my fellow regents that this is our number one priority. This is, if you will, our grand challenge to continue to work on this. And on behalf of all of us, we thank you, our presenters, and the entire team, and Regent Simmons and Regent McMillan for your work, and all of you for engaging questions and driving this to a hopefully a conclusion at some point in time. So we thank you for that. Regent Cohen.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. I want to thank the presenters and our work group for all the hard work that has gone behind this. I know it's been tremendous. I want to emphasize 2 points that some of my colleagues have already made because I think they're really important. One, I think the board selection, as Regent Rocha mentioned, is a very important, really, issue. And I know that in the past, our appointments to the Fairview Board have been done sort of by a committee, and they've gotten in a room, and then it's on a sheet. And I think that this selection is going to be really important, and so I hope that we figure out a process that really engages the entire board, not just a committee, and then we see it on a sheet of paper. And the other thing, which I know all of you are working on, but to me is such an important issue for our faculty and for the whole deal, is the culture. I hope that everybody, and I imagine you are, thinking about how we can bring 2 very different cultures together to build, as Regent Simmons said, our medical school and the academic health system, and to have an academic system. And so I know that's something people are thinking about, but that's a big job. Thanks.
Thanks, Regent Cohen. Because of all your good questions, efficient questions, thoughtful questions, discipline, we now have 35 minutes before we begin our next committee meeting. I thank you, and we are adjourned.
Say we're out.